Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next edition of the Encompass webinar series. I'm excited to have Joy Mikowski join us from Access Marketing Company for our webinar entitled Move Minds Before Meetings, How Executive Visibility Drives Real Influence. If you haven't met Joy already, she is a marketing strategist and a revenue growth advisor who helps executives, marketers, and sales teams turn bold ideas into measurable wins. As a partner at Access Marketing Company, she develops go-to-market strategies that boost visibility, engages customers, and drives growth. She's well known for generating smart ideas and turning them to clear, actionable marketing and sales tactics that deliver results, which I think everyone listening right now can greatly benefit from, including myself. So today, Joy will be taking a deep dive into showing how telecom executives can use LinkedIn to influence deals early. In addition, you'll learn what modern visibility actually looks like and how your voice can start shaping decisions long before the sales pitch is even put out there to your customers. We're also extremely excited to have Joy join us in Tampa at the Compass Show for our marketing workshop panel on marketing's new blueprint, balancing AI, automation, and authenticity, taking place Monday, November 3rd at 1:30 p.m. Then following that workshop at 2:45 p.m. at the same day, Joy will be doing an interactive workshop entitled You Can't Chat Your Way to Sales Success, Strategic AI for Revenue Generation. If you notice, there's a theme there on AI and marketing that we'll be getting to at the show. So for more information and to register, navigate to at show.encompass.org. And with that said, it's my pleasure to turn things over to Joy for this webinar.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much, Keith. That was a great introduction, probably better than I deserve, but I really appreciate it. To all of you, it's really kind of cool. I saw the registration list, and this is no pressure at all. I feel like I'm talking to a lot of friends. In fact, a great shout out to Joe Patton, who already sent me a text. So really appreciate having all of you on, and I'm so honored that you would invest your time to consider this information that we're about to share today. You guys, I know that this is probably one of those things where you're multitasking during this webinar, and I can really appreciate that. And so I'll try to jump out at you when I think you really need to take a nugget with you as we're talking about this call, because you guys, make no mistake, sales is, in my mind, in crisis. I'll say that again, sales is in crisis. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why. But because sales is becoming harder and harder and harder, we as sales enablement and marketing professionals who support revenue generation, we have got to think differently. We cannot stay stuck in the ways we've always done it. And we dang sure can't just try to hit an easy button with AI to get ourselves out of this, right? So we're going to be talking for the next hour, or maybe not that long. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of time to go get some lunch in the process. We're going to be talking about ways that we can think differently about influencing our key audiences and really amplifying thought leadership, content, maybe a little bit of disruption to really lift our reputation, our visibility, and certainly give our sales teams that boost so that as they're out there fighting the good fight on the revenue front, we're right there supporting them. One of the things I'd like to say whenever I get to have an audience with sales leaders is I say marketing should only exist, and marketing and sales enablement should only exist to drive revenue, right? I don't have any reason for existing unless I'm helping my counterparts in sales sell something. Right. And now that can take shape in a lot of different ways, right? Brand and product and, sales enablement, certainly what we might consider, traditional marketing, digital, things like that. But I think one of the best things we can all do together here today is sort of lock arms and go, even anything I'm suggesting that you do today isn't for its own sake. Tie it to revenue. How can I use what we're talking about today to drive more traffic to the website, more forms, to my inbound, more ability for when my salespeople reach out to their target list, they go, hey, by the way, I saw a post from your CEO and I was really intrigued by it, right? We want to make sure we're building awareness, make sure we're building engagement, and ultimately, you guys, at the end of the day, we've got to be building pipelines. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get right to it. So we are going to pop over. All right. And here we go. So I am going to, one of the things I changed the title of this a little bit from what Keith said, because one of the things I always want to do is, you see here how I am so passionate about tying everything we do to revenue. Everything we do should have a revenue tie-in. And the reason why I say generic to genius is I think you guys, I'm going to pontificate a little bit along the way. One of the things I have struggled with along the way is seeing marketing try to just use AI as the easy button. And you guys, I have seen more terrible, watered down sort of information on chat or on digital channels than I have ever seen. And I think that's a problem. I think we've really got to challenge ourselves, because AI is not meant to just simply replace the human, right? The human touch, the human experience. It's meant to make it easier to do things the right way, not make it easier to do things the wrong way. So, so anyway, let me just go ahead and give you an example. Hopefully all of you know who this guy is, right? If any of you have seen the movie Moneyball, his character in the movie was named Peter Brand. And by the way, I know everybody says, and they sound like a jerk when they say it, the book is even better. But what was happening in the book Moneyball and the movie Moneyball was the Oakland A's are a small market baseball team, and they were losing, right? They were losing. They don't have the budget to outspend the bigger players. They don't have the resources that, larger organizations have, but they were still trying to play by the same rules. And they were, just seeing themselves sink deeper and deeper, with their performance. And what's so cool about the story Moneyball, and the reason why I love to use it is just this moment for us to think differently about the way we approach things, is you cannot win if you continue to play by the same rules, right? So what I hope you leave with today, I hope you leave with a new way to think about how to drive your brand, how to drive your solutions, how to get into the mind share of your key target audiences. But I do think that what you should walk away with today is we can't keep doing what we've always been doing. We have to change. We have to consider new ways of thinking. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to start with some bad news, right? And the bad news is, you guys, and I don't have to tell you this, you guys probably already know, because I would ask you this when I'm in a room full of people. I like to say, when was the last time you filled out a web form? When was the last time you called an 800 number to get more information, right? You probably didn't. And I'm just envisioning in my mind all of you virtually sitting out there with your hands up saying, I don't fill out web forms anymore, right? And part of that is such a colossal erosion of trust with brands, based on what's going to happen when I put in my information. And you know what that's doing, you guys, is because we've lost that trust as the brand, as the marketers, the corporate communications, whatever, department you put it under. Because of that, we've made it so much harder for our sales teams to be able to have inbound leads and have people who are engaged early in the process. I'll take you on a little trip down memory lane. So I've had access marketing for 20 years, and my very first client was a dark fiber broker, and that's how I got into telecom in general. And my first engagement, first customer at Access Marketing Company, I was doing Google Ads management. And I mean to tell you guys, I don't know if you remember the good old days of Google Ads 20 years ago, when generating leads was like shooting fish in a barrel. We were generating so many leads with that website that the salespeople were cherry picking only the good ones. We were getting drunk off of it, and it was just, happy days are here again. And then, of course, now fast forward 20 years later, if we even see one lead form come in, we're like, oh my God, this is so great, right? We actually got a lead, because the model has flipped, right? The model has flipped from what you're able to generate and push through your own channels in terms of hand raisers. And then it's flipped to, you actually have to go out into the wild and into your circles of influence and try to gin up interest in what you're doing so that you can get someone interested in a conversation, right? So it is incredible how our problems have flip-flopped. And of course, there's the age old problem and we all hate it, which is this. And marketing will say sales isn't working the leads right. And sales will say marketing isn't giving us good leads. And the marketing, the stuff that marketing's producing isn't good and helpful. And all of a sudden it's this. And you know what your leadership just cares about? They just care about revenue. They just care about pipeline. They don't want to see wins on the board. They don't want to hear excuses from sales, and they don't want to hear the checklist of marketing going, well, I did this and I did this and I did this, because at the end of the day, none of that matters. Excuses don't sell anything and checklists don't sell anything, right? At the end of the day, you guys having wins on the scoreboard is what moves the problem, right? It is what matters. We obviously, as I mentioned, I've seen engagement with any sort of information, and especially digital, decline over the years. And of course, this is the big one, you guys. More and more of your prospects are doing more research, and they're self-serving their information more than ever before you ever even get the chance to talk with them and start to shape and influence their buying criteria, their opinions, their biases, the questions they should be asking. You aren't even getting a chance to get in early on the process to shape those, because they're doing so much of it in the background, right, in all the different channels that they have. So I posit to you, and I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes helping convince you why I think digital thought leadership, and digital thought leadership specifically with key personalities within your companies, right? Could be your executives, could be a really impactful product person, could be a really almost a super nerd in your technology group, or in the NOC or whatever. I posit to you that if you will find some folks who are people who you can tie to, you will, and when you amplify it the right way, that can serve as a new source of engagement, right, with your target audiences. So this is what I'm saying is, hey, we can do it the way we've always been doing it, which is create branded content and talk about ourselves and try to continue to feature dump on people and things like that. And I'm not beating us up, you guys. We're marketers. We're the hardest working people at that dang company. And we're all killing ourselves trying to be successful. But at the same time, sometimes we get ourselves into such a, we're so tired that we think about getting things done rather than being effective. So I believe there's another option out there, which is I think we have a new way to build credibility and potentially generate results by doing things differently. All right. So one of the things I want to tell you is, and guys, I know I'm going to focus a lot on LinkedIn today, but I want you to think, when you hear LinkedIn, but I really want you to think digital channels. So it could be LinkedIn, could be blogs on your website, could be video that you employ, you could be getting, posting videos on YouTube, posting videos on your LinkedIn feed, could be your thought leadership, getting an audience on popular podcasts and being interviewed by different sources, and then using that thought leadership, slicing it and dicing it 100 different ways, and using that and amplifying it across your channels. So specifically, interestingly enough, LinkedIn is still an amazing platform that gets a ton of engagement. Right. I actually, I talk to sales teams all the time. I do a lot of coaching when it comes to, having your message hit people's inboxes. And the reality is, one of the best ways to get your message across to people is A, don't make it about you, make it about them. But B, you can use LinkedIn as a great platform for getting in front of the right people. So LinkedIn is definitely a better place to get your message across than relying on your own website. If you're relying on your own website, you guys, one of the things you have to think about is you better have a dang big ad budget to drive traffic to that website, which, by the way, is a whole other webinar for another time, at how much we're seeing costs go up, ad creative fatigue go up. So the cost of driving people to your website is going up, up, up. So we've got to think, let's work smarter, not harder, and leverage LinkedIn as a platform, YouTube as a platform that already gets a ton of eyeballs. How do we just borrow some of the eyeballs that are there and divert them to what our brand and our leadership wants to say? Secondly, right, when your employees are posting about your brand and when they're saying something authentic, not just a canned company post, but really something interesting, something insightful, they're getting a lot more engagement. So you guys, it really, when I'm waving my hands, there's something important you need to hear right now if you're multitasking. And it is this: people trust people more than they trust brands. Okay. People trust people more than they trust brands. So I want to give you a great example. You had probably never heard of Mint Mobile until Ryan Reynolds started doing commercials, right? He is a person. And it's funny because when you think of Mint Mobile, you think of Ryan Reynolds. So a lot of times, you guys, what our human brains do is we can't really understand fully a company, but we can for sure understand people. The best example of this that was exploited by genius marketers 20 years ago was the "I'm a Mac, I'm a PC." Wasn't that just so brilliant when Apple had that kind of the young hip guy, but he was a little bit nerdy, but he was sort of young and hip, go against that old stodgy guy that was meant to, and I love how they found a person who was even kind of like a little bit of a chubby Bill Gates, right? And they actually had these people embodying a company. And it just made you subconsciously think, well, I want to identify with kind of the cool, hip, smart guy, not the old, stodgy, chubby guy, right? And so it was just this interesting personification of a brand. You guys, when your employees or when your leaders personify your brand, your features, your benefits, what differentiates you and things like that, when it's people explaining it in a really authentic, human, no BS way, it hits home, you know, orders of magnitude better than you just putting a brochure that says, we have 100% uptime and we have the best service in the business and our SLAs are the best, right? I mean, you can say that till you're blue in the face as the brand, but until your people really embody it, put it into their own words, give specific examples about how they can prove the bullet points that you put on your website, it just stays, right? Think about your website and your collateral is really just kind of a boring, forgettable 2D version. When you put a human behind it, all of a sudden it just takes on more dimensions, more color, more personality than any website, any social post could ever have from a company brand perspective. All right. So this is a key, right? Three-fourths of people trust what people are saying about your brand and the stories you tell about your solutions more than just the facts and figures of your solution itself. So that's something really to think about. And obviously, interestingly enough, people are going out after they're hearing something. They are going to the website then as a follow-on exercise. So it can be a pull-through strategy where you get somebody to get excited about what they're hearing and really creating a unique way of saying it that's memorable and in living color. And then they go and try to follow up the research after the fact, which is really a great way to do it, right? I hope all of you, after hearing this webinar and seeing who is this crazy gal who's waving her hands and getting so excited, I hope you all go to accessmarketingcompany.com and go, okay, what's this really about? What does she really do? And then you're going to see, okay, Joy was the, rah, in your face, super opinionated, had a lot of very specific points. And then the website is just sort of a supporting resource for my story that I tell one-to-one. All right. So what's the punchline here? I genuinely believe with all of my heart that you have a competitive advantage sitting in your company directory with the people who are sitting there. And it might be a really outlandish, outspoken, amazing salesperson. It might be a product person. It might be an executive. It might be someone on your technology team. I've actually seen it come from a lot of different places within an organization. We have a client who has a customer service manager who has a really big social following, and she doesn't always post about the brand, which is one of the things we'll get to, but she's a prolific, consistent poster, and she's extremely authentic in what she posts. And so she's been steadily building a following. What's great about that from the company's perspective is when they want to disseminate some information through her, right? They've got a big platform, and then the company can share her posts rather than it just always being the company and then she shares the company's posts. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, you guys, I keep mixing and mingling my storytelling here, but I really do want to continue to tell you that you've got a problem big enough you can't ignore. And one of the problems that you have is we saw a major shift, 5 years ago when, post COVID, when everybody sort of moved home, getting the way people consumed information and the attention spans just it changed again, right? And where it changes because you're not in the office, there's a lot more people, who are sitting on their phones at home more often, right? It's one of the things we always struggle with is if you've got your notifications on your phone, you might have Facebook notifications or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, LinkedIn, whatever those notifications are, they're popping up all day long and they're distracting you. So you aren't holding their mind share because they aren't sitting in an office just typing away on a screen with one thing. They've got multiple things popping up and happening, right? The other thing, I've already told you this, too much of that buyer's journey is happening where you can't see it. So, the other problem that we have is it was 8 seconds a couple of years ago. I don't even know if it's even 8 seconds anymore, right? We're scrolling and we're not even seeing things for a split second. The other problem is, you guys, this is where I'm going to constantly crawl up on my AI soapbox. I in another life, I work with a platform called Intentico, which is intenti.co, intenti.co. And one of the things I do on that side is I try to use AI as a mechanism for helping sales do better by using AI, but not using AI to sell. There's a very important difference. But here's the thing. You guys know when you get an email that was written by AI. You guys know when you see a LinkedIn post that was written by AI, only AI, right? You guys, when I'm telling you that almost 3/4 of people respond when the messaging is personalized, don't think you're going to just use AI to do something and it's just going to replace the part of you that really can make something unique and authentic and interesting and relevant and timely, right? You've still got to do that. And, that's one of the things that, again, I'm stealing a little bit of my thunder from when you all, of course, are going to come trampling to my session at Encompass, but you've got to keep it authentic. What you do, even if you're using things that are what I would call AI assisted, you've got to stay authentic, right? We've got way too much happening at all the times. Trust is eroding day by day, especially as people use AI to replace things, right? AI is doing a really nefarious thing, which is it's adding word count in bulk, but it is still obfuscating the message. It is still hiding the important points. It is still taking away the authentic human experience that you need to have to build true trust in a brand and really want to get to know a brand. And then finally, like I said, I believe that you guys have to figure out the right formula of the right personalities, the right platforms, right? And the right use of AI to assist you in order to win at the game of digital thought leadership. All right. So, right, I've said many times, the reason why I keep putting this stat on here, you guys, is because I don't think you understand how important it is. Too much of their decision-making process has happened before they get to you. And that means, let me tell you why you should care about that stat that I keep posting. It is because when it comes to you at that point, you are now relegated to competing on features and price. Okay. So you are competing on features and price. You are not able to compete on truly differentiating yourself and shaping the buyer's vision. You are having to compete on features and price. Interestingly enough, in IT, right? So IT leaders are influenced by thought leadership and by brand and by some of the outspoken people who are saying the things that need to be said from a technology standpoint, from an innovation standpoint, from a risk standpoint, right? You guys remember everyone on this call probably is targeting IT leaders as one of their key buying groups. And if you're targeting IT leaders as a key buying group, right, you've got to do an extra, good job of winning their trust, helping them see that what they're doing won't blow up their ecosystem, what have you. By the way, maybe this is a good moment to say If any of you on this call are more focused on fiber to the home, I've got some interesting information for you. Hit me up, DM me on LinkedIn, whatever, and I'll give you some very specific information that's B2C versus B2B. But the lion's share of those of you on this call are in a B2B, like you're at a carrier or a regional service provider or whatever. So that's why the information I'm sharing today is really oriented around that. So at the end of the day, are you paying attention to the needs of your audience, the trends that are shaping thoughts of your audience, where they're getting in their information, how they're getting information? One of the tricks I'm going to give you later, but I'm shaking my hands. You guys need to listen to this real quick. A lot of times I get people, concerned about, I don't have time, but what do I do? I don't have time to generate all this content. You guys, first of all, I call BS on that. Everybody's got time. Second of all, here's what I would tell you. You don't have to be the genesis of every bit of content you generate. One of the best ways to get your executives started on this process is having them jump into a conversation or a topic that's already going and just post one sentence or one thought. So they're sharing something and they're putting one little nugget of their own unique perspective on something else somebody has already written. Obviously, the gold standard is somebody actually really putting out a lot of their own unique long form content, long form videos, things like that. But even if all you get them to do is just make sure to comment on things others are saying and make sure they're staying timely and relevant with different news and trends and headlines, and maybe even some, disruptive things that are out there, just having them add one sentence to an existing thing. Everybody has time for that. All right. So now for the part that, again, I feel like I say this in so many contexts, so I apologize if you've heard this before, but I'm saying it again because you have to know this. A lot of us on this call, right, are Gen X. Maybe you might even have some boomers here. Obviously, I've got my millennial friends. I know you're out there too. Here's why this matters now more than ever. Your millennials and younger, right? So your millennials, your Gen Zs, your Gen Alphas, and things like that. They are social first. Us Gen Xers and even the boomers are, like, I would say the boomers are very much social light down to socially antagonistic. Like they don't like it. They won't do it. They don't see the value. Like, I want to go play golf or I want to press the flesh and all that. And they're not necessarily wrong, but it is becoming a more and more outdated strategy for how I shape hearts and minds. Us Gen Xers have adopted social media for the most part. We're using it and things like that. Some begrudgingly, some more aggressively, right? But the millennials and younger. And so as your decision makers in your decision-making units, as your influencers and your champions at your prospect companies are starting to get younger and younger, now you cannot use digital strategies and social influencing as an afterthought. You have got to have that as a key pillar in your strategy for building your brand, creating influence, creating engagement. You cannot afford to overlook this anymore, given the fact that your audience is getting younger and younger and they are getting savvier and savvier in social channels. All right. So one of the things I want you to think about too is I always like to help you understand what happens when, when people are searching, and this is not just a millennial thing, it's everybody. Sales sees that, people are up here asking questions and things like that. However, what people are actually researching is just a huge iceberg of information, right? So they're conducting research online, they're evaluating multiple vendors, they're coming to a conclusion before you ever get them. So when they search, right, they're searching these things. Today, unfortunately, too many of us only give them, right, some plain pieces of bread, right? We're not giving them a full course meal with lots of different flavors and colors. We're just giving them some slices of bread and we're thinking that that's going to be enough. And here's why that matters. That puts so much pressure on your sales team to be that color, that flavor, that everything. And you guys, I got to tell you, that's a lot of pressure for your sales team. And all of you sitting out there know, when you think about your sales teams, mileage may vary at their ability to bring that color, that flavor, that dynamicism, right? That engagement. You don't have, all of those are not created equal. So when you're relying on them to really serve as the personality and the flavor of the brand, you're probably putting too big of a chore onto them. All right. So I think this is the thing, you guys, that is one of the most shocking and heartbreaking stats that I can give you, which is, most people, almost 90% of people would just prefer to purchase online because they've lost so much trust in salespeople. Because salespeople spout company bullets, don't truly bring the value, and I call it the so what, right? The so you can. It's funny, at Access Marketing, I tell all of our team to keep a Post-it note on their monitor that focuses on the so what and the so you can. And what that means is anytime somebody touts a feature to me, I want to very respectfully ask you back, so what? Why should I care about that feature you just told me? And I want us to finish the sentence. If you give me a feature, I want you to be able to finish the sentence with, so you can increase your productivity, gain efficiency, shore up areas of risk, et cetera, right? There needs to be a so you can. Now, you guys, with that, those are the types of things that can be so impactful and meaningful when you're building a digital thought leadership strategy. Okay, so I want you to, take from this, hopefully you've seen attention spans are shrinking, sales trust has eroded, brands are being far too me too everywhere, all over the place. Like sometimes when you go and read across different websites, you cannot tell the difference because all of them say the same thing. And so with every website you go to, it's talking about uptime, SLAs, we have the best, we're local, we care, our people are better. When you call or knock, people answer. Like it is almost becoming laughable how everybody is saying the same thing all over the place. I don't know if DQE is on the call, but I want to give a shout out to DQE because one of the things that is sometimes really annoying in working with me specifically is you'll try to say something and I'll say, prove it. I need an example of that. Tell me it, give me a time where you did that. And if you can't, then I say, okay, well, your homework is you need to go talk to your field techs, your sales guys, your knock, your whatever, and bring back stories of something really amazing that happened. And DQE gave me a story recently that I just loved. And it was, there was a hospital out in one of their markets and their guys are out there with their generators going to that hospital in the middle of the night to make sure their hospital stays up. And it's just like, that's the kind of proof. And so like what I would love to do is take a story like that and write it 10 different ways, right? And post it 10 different ways on all the different channels and really kind of tout that, because that story is worth 1,000 bullets anywhere that talk about how DQE really cares and DQE's, service is better and people are better, right? That story alone, because our human brains don't really understand context. Really kind of funny. I don't know if my internet is going slow, but sometimes it freezes me in some of the funniest pictures. So I apologize to those of you who are having to see me like caught in a really funny in a really funny freeze frame. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, I'm gonna skip ahead because I actually want to start getting to the meat of this. Why should you think about thought leadership on digital channels? Okay, because as I mentioned, with your younger buyers, digital spaces are replacing the golf course, right? The places where you used to go out for a round of golf and get to know people and, stop by the clubhouse at the end and have an Arnold Palmer or something a little stronger, right? Social settings and digital settings are replacing those. And so, but you guys, you have to find the way to still connect on a real level in those digital channels, just like you used to do on the golf course. All right, so hopefully you guys all know who this guy is, right? This is if you aren't familiar with the organization, the Savannah Bananas, they were a minor league team that basically just broke away from the traditional rules of baseball to develop what they called banana ball, right? And what they did was they were constantly listening to their audience and listening to what they enjoyed about the game and what they didn't enjoy about the game. And what they did was they literally rewrote the rules of baseball all according to their customers and what their customers cared about. And you guys, what I want you to take away from the Savannah Bananas is, where and how are you listening to your prospects and to your customers, to your former customers, right? To your people who were closed lost, and finding out what do you care about? What trends are impacting you, right? Everyone loves to do that. What's keeping you up at night? And it's kind of like, if there's a little bit of an eye roll when I hear that now, because there are certainly, more ways to ask that question. But really just kind of understanding what's impacting you right now. You guys, one of the things I preach at Access Marketing Company when we're working with our clients too, is I want to know how to help our sales teams that we get to work with see your job isn't to sell them something. Your job is actually to figure out how to make them look good to their boss, how to help them get their next raise, how to help them make their highest bonus. That's actually what your job is. And what your solution is one of the things that's going to help them do that. But if you think your solution is the end, it is not. It is a means to an end. And do you understand that story well enough to figure out how to position your solution in a way that makes sense to your prospects? So the reason why I share the Savannah Banana stories is because they are the best example in recent history of listening to baseball fans and figuring out what they're frustrated by, figuring out what type of experience they want, and then creating that experience. All right. So I'm going to skip this. I'm going to get ahead to why should you invest in digital thought leadership? It helps you build credibility where you don't currently have it today. It makes you as approachable as ever, right? So now, like if you guys had just gone to my website, accessmarketingcompany.com, you might have been like, okay, this is interesting. None of you are going to fill out my contact form and want to talk to me. Maybe after seeing and hearing me talk and getting to see in living color what I'm so passionate about, you might want to talk with me, right? And that's the difference, right? And obviously, you guys, the thing about digital thought leadership is you and your salespeople can use your digital thought leadership and you can send it very specifically to people you are trying to influence, right? You can put an interesting, so if your CEO posts something really cool and disruptive about your solutions, let's just take DQE and their, generators in the middle of the night story, right? If DQ, Mike Sicoli is the CEO of DQE. If he posted about that and the sales team at DQE were able to send that to all of their hospital prospects and go, you know what? I saw this and thought of you. And I hope we never have to come out in the middle of the night with generators, but by God, I want you to know that we will if we have to. Wouldn't that be just so much of a better way to get engagement with a hospital prospect than just sending them another email that says, we offer a diverse connection. We have the best people. We offer 100% uptime, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, we've got to think differently about how to do it and how to message it. All right. So, I do talk here about targeting decision makers and being seen as a credible expert. I want to talk a little bit about how you can do that. Right now, I've kind of gone in, if you notice the narrative arc of this presentation, what I started by doing is trying to sell you the problem, right? Did I do a good job? Did I convince you have a problem and you have an opportunity? Hopefully so. Then I said, hey, one of the ways to solve that problem is to think about digital thought leadership. Now I'm going to tell you how I think you can do that with digital thought leadership. All right. So clearly here, right, when I use my Savannah Bananas example, right, it's clear and professional. Like you can be articulate and interesting and things like that. But the thing you do have to think about jumping over and crossing the chasm is being memorable. One of the things, obviously, Savannah Bananas is extremely memorable, and they're growing by leaps and bounds because they were willing to be authentic, take a risk, right? And things like that. So part of this for you is figuring out the bounds of your brand, right? And one of the things that is important is if your company doesn't have, right, some social media boundaries and some digital thought leadership boundaries, let's create them, right? Let's create what you're allowed to say and not say, because I think that's one of the reasons. So sometimes people come to me and go, Joy, I don't know, can't really do this because our brand isn't going to approve and things like that. And I have some really interesting answers for you we can talk about offline. But one of the best ways you can do that is to proactively develop some good digital thought leadership standards that you can hold everyone to, that doesn't get your brand in hot water, doesn't have legal knocking on your door, right? But you still need for the goal to be distinctive and memorable. All right, I want to show you a great example of somebody who's done this in recent history. This is Bruce Hembry. He's the GM of the Americas over at Ciena. One of the things he does so well is he is extremely authentic about what he does and how he talks. He has this cool thing called Hembry Hangouts where he actually sits down and creates video with customers where he's talking to them. He's asking them questions and he's really getting into the minds of them. He then translates that content for his internal team, for product, right? And where it's relevant for an external audience. But what's really cool about this is when you read Bruce's LinkedIn profile and you see it, like you can see that you know what he's about, you know what he stands for. And then as he's generating content, you can see that it's all centered around his same pillars. You guys, I think you would be very well suited if you're going to go to key personalities within your brand, executive leaders and things like that. Let's be planful about it. Let's not just say, hey, I need you to start posting more on LinkedIn. It's really more, how do we build your executive brand so that we can have the sales team connect to it and drive more prospects and demo bookings and ultimately pipeline, because the fact that you're willing to take a bigger soapbox. A really, really interesting example that's a name some of you may know is Dan Caruso. Dan Caruso was the former CEO of Zayo. He's now, obviously still a big deal within the industry, but what's interesting is Dan Caruso used to have a blog. If you guys remembered, it was called Bear on Business because his nickname is Bear. And so it was called Bear on Business. And he and Dave Rusin, who at the time was the CEO of American Fiber Systems, which interestingly Zayo ultimately acquired, Dave Rusin and Dan Caruso were kind of like pretty outspoken, right? They were pretty provocative, disruptive, both of them in their own ways. And it really helped to build both of their brands because their salespeople were able to kind of like point to their CEOs like, yeah, did you see that? See what our guy said? See what he's doing? And I wanted you, if any of you have been around telecom that long, you guys probably remember, but for any of you don't, there are some really interesting examples that I can share of you can look at a blueprint for people who've done this and been successful at it. All right, another one, right? I've put a couple of examples in here, and the question I always get asked is, hey, will you share these slides? Yes, we will absolutely share these slides at the end of this. But I want you to see here how cybersecurity can be so incredibly technical, and it can sound so vanilla all the time when it's talked about with the same buzzwords. But if you really think about how, wherever you can, to create reality, to create relevancy and timeliness in what you're talking about, that's really where you're going to get an incredible result with this, right? Look at that. The dude has 46,000 followers, right? Clearly he's saying something that people want to listen to. And what's cool about that is that only helps his brand. So his brand and he, right, work together symbiotically to hopefully raise revenue for the entire sales team. All right, another one, Dharmesh. Any of you, like HubSpot is a marketing automation platform, right? Dharmesh is kind of the one who sort of like, came up with the whole concept of inbound marketing and things like that. He uses a lot of different platforms, right? He's putting out videos, he's on podcasts, he's writing blogs and things like that. He sort of made it his mission to sort of be the spokesperson, be the embodiment of what his solution promises to do. So that's just another good example for you. So you guys, what does this mean? This means that from the platforms you choose to use, from how you choose to represent yourself on a platform like LinkedIn, which is obviously the biggest and best platform you could be using in sort of a digital thought leadership strategy, right? It's like, how do I just start to make it different? What are some of the little things I can be helping my key personalities do to appear better? Right. One of the things I like to when I'm guiding executives or key personalities on how to develop their brand is I try to at least get them to think like, who am I online? Am I the funny person? Am I the snarky person? Who am I and what's my personality and how do I, how do I build it? And I worked with the CEO a few years back, and he was very big into mountain biking. And so I said, well, let's use that because there's so many parallels to business in mountain biking. And so we were just able to really build just kind of a cool story around mountain biking. So it could be, it's funny, Joe McCourt, if anyone from Unity is on this call, Joe McCourt is an avid golfer. So you'll see posts from time to time from Joe about golf and things like that. So I really think there are ways to bring in a very authentic way to create executive thought leadership while at the same time bringing in some really interesting aspects of their personality. In fact, Kathy De La Garza of Unity, she's the president of Unity Fiber. She was a helicopter pilot in the military. And so we were able to draw some really cool parallels. And if you read a recent article from her on the Unity Windstream merger, like she wrote a really cool article about like her being a former helicopter pilot. And so you guys, our role in something like that, what our role is we usually serve as the interviewer. So we're sort of teasing out these really cool things, because for you guys, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, well, that's all and great, but I don't know that my executives really have the personality to carry this off or pull this off, or we don't really know if we have enough interesting things to say and things like that. Well, with you guys or with us, like you can coax out enough really interesting points and then really build a story around it. But you got to figure out what is kind of their touchstone brand personality for their personal brand that you want to build off of. Right. One of the things I want, and again, I'll send this out, there's too much to read on here, but one of the things I want you to think about is Rome wasn't built in a day. If you want to do this, there is a way to sort of start. Remember when I was saying consistent in industry commentary, go find thought leaders who are already posting and post a 1-sentence commentary on, I saw this article and I actually think this, or I disagree with that, or a key question that comes to mind is this. They can just start tagging on to things that already exist so that they don't have to produce their own content to start. Now, of course, we want to get to a place where we're actually offering a genuine first person set of ideals and ways to do it. And we want to, be able to generate our own content in addition to continuing to tag and piggyback on other people's content. And then of course, the advanced super ninja black belt level is when you actually feel confident enough, willing enough, and learned enough to really start being the voice that other people are quoting, and you're saying things that are titillating. I'm always fascinated by companies because I always want all of the brands that we get to work with. I always want you to put a stake in the ground. Like, who cares? Like, put it out there, make a prediction, even if it's wrong. Think about this. Think about all the prediction. You guys all probably watch Sunday football. Those analysts in the morning are putting out predictions all day long, and they're wrong more than half the time, right? But it's their job to sit there. And the reason why you watch them is because they are opinionated enough and interesting enough to have an opinion and to take a risk of being wrong. I think that's what we want to think about too, is let's think about helping our leaders get to a place where they're okay putting something out there. They might be wrong, but you know what? All of the salespeople can point to their leader and say, my guy or my gal is putting it out there and becoming a sounding board, right? They're becoming a platform against which I can promote this to my people that I'm trying to sell to today. All right. So if you're thinking about adding this, there's 3 things you need to do, right? Make a business case, right? Quantify it, figure it out, how I can make it easy. And then of course, align it to business goals, right? Figure out one of the best ways to do it, you guys, is to show them places where it's working for others and how they could do it too. Then of course you're helping explain to them, this is how they're already thinking, oh my God, I already have 2 full-time jobs. Why are you giving me another, what feels like a full-time job? The other thing I would say, you guys, too, is I think people like the Kardashians have given a lot of people a bad taste in their mouth, because honestly, you guys, I'm going to let you know a little secret. I really struggle. My team wants me to be more out front, doing more video, doing more stuff. And I get like, oh, I don't need the spotlight. I don't want the like, I just don't need to do all of that. But I got to stop being so selfish platform. I've got a brand and I'm certainly outspoken enough that my team could definitely use that to their benefit if I'm willing to do that. So I got to get out of my own way at the same time. And finally, you guys, as I said, I opened with this and I'm going to close with this, which is you've got to tie it to business goals. You've got to say, hey, your willingness to get out there and provide more visibility and thought leadership and things like that. We're going to use this in the sales capacity this way. And this is how we're going to measure success. This is how our sales team is going to use it, right? And this is how we're ultimately going to drive pipeline and revenue based on what you're doing. All right. So there's a lot more here. I'm going to skip ahead to something you need to see. Cut through the noise, share insights, be a storyteller wherever you can, right? Be a storyteller. If you guys were given a test at the end of this, what you'd probably remember about what I said has more to do with the way I've told the stories rather than the specific stats and bullet points themselves. And finally, of course, when your executives or your key team members are willing to share those disruptive points of view and things like that, figuring out 100 different ways to slice and dice those and amplify those is just the best way that you can possibly honor their time commitment in doing that. You guys, I want to actually leave you with this 1 to 4 rule when it comes, if you're building a thought leadership strategy and a digital, kind of amplification strategy, one of the things you want your leadership and any of your key personnel that are doing this to do is they can't just, one of the things I see salespeople do all the time, and it just makes me bang my head against the wall, is they'll share their company content. And most of the time, you guys know this, most of your company content is all about you, and it's all about your features, and you talk about yourself and what awards you won and things like that. The problem with your salespeople sharing only that content is now you look at their feed and they're only sharing your branded content. What we want for your sales team, your executives, everybody who wants to build their professional credibility and thought leadership is we want them to be sharing other content. We want them to be joining other conversations rather than just trying to continue to stand on their soapbox with their little megaphone talking about your brand. So a nice rule of thumb is for every one post, post about a trend, post about a current event, post, it's bring your dog to work day, post about, something interesting or timely that your audience might find interesting, post a question, something, post a recent experience. Hey, just left an IT leader's office, and I was really shocked by the fact that they said that, their focus for the next year is all about XYZ, right? I mean, just posting something that is not just a regurgitation of your brand posts is going to be the key in developing your following and building credibility. All right. I want to say you don't have to become a Kardashian. It doesn't have to be annoying. If you do it the right way, all you're doing is taking what you already know, taking things that honestly you say, things that you say when you're one-on-one with something, and being willing to filter that in a way that's appropriate for a one-to-many channel, like a digital or social media channel. So in this deck, you're going to have some things that, this is like what I'm seeing, right? These are just great ways to, come up with content. Sometimes what you can do is send something like this to your leadership and say, while you're driving in, I'm going to interview you, and you're just going to wax philosophical for the next 30 minutes on your drive on as many topics as I can. And then that's going to give you, it could give you a quarter's worth of really good thought leadership content that you could leverage for that thought leader or even for your brand. Doing a little bit can go a really long way. Now, one of the things we've kind of given you here is you can rate yourself on your current state of affairs. How are we doing in our current efforts? And then finally, there's a couple of different options, right? You can do it yourself by all means, get in there, grab it with both hands, figure out what you're going to do differently in your own marketing and what you're going to set aside in your own resources in-house to be able to drive a thought leadership program. You can work with someone like us. Obviously, we can kind of give you the playbooks, help you get it set up, and then you can kind of run it. Or of course, you can work with someone like us and we can just do it all for you. Now, there's lots of folks that do what we do. So we're not certainly the only choice. I would submit to you that one of the nice parts about working with someone like us is because we speak telecom, when your leaders are spouting off all the 3-letter acronyms that are so big in the telecommunications space, we know what the words mean and we don't have to ask, hey, what is that? So that's one of the nice things about working with someone like us. But what I would tell you guys, I hope you all choose option B. I hope you don't leave this call and just say, oh yeah, that was interesting, but I'm just going to keep doing the way I'm doing it. I hope I've gotten you convinced that you have an opportunity with the personalities that exist in your brand today, those key people in your leadership, product, salespeople, people in your NOC, people in your customer service organization, right? You have got people that you can amplify to personify your brand, build engagement, build trust, and ultimately give your sales team an ace in the hole to be building engagement with the prospects that they so desperately want to get mindshare with. Those people exist in your organization today. Now it's up to you to go out and figure out who they are and come up with a strategy about how you can leverage them and amplify them. So, right? At the end of the day, this is your equation. And I use the word executive here a lot, you guys. It doesn't necessarily have to be executive. It can very much just be personalities who are willing to speak intelligently about the technology, the trends, the product, the changes, the challenges, the pitfalls. Anyone could be a sales engineer, right? People who are on the front lines hearing it day by day. They can be some of the best sources of information. One of the things, you guys, we've done it before where we've built an executive leadership program that's really built like Dan. We actually did Dan Caruso's long ago, 20 years ago, and it was built around one person. We've also done it more recently where it's multiple leaders in the organization, right? If KFN's on here, Kansas FiberNet, right? We're doing thought leadership for them where there's, sales leadership, product leadership, NOC leadership, operations leadership, their CFO, who's their interim CEO. I think thought leadership can come from a lot of different places, and you can speak to a lot of different members of the decision-making unit. So you can do it where you really rally around one voice, or you can do it where you find multiple people. One of the reasons why I like sometimes tapping multiple people in an organization is the burden doesn't fall to one person all the time. So sometimes it's a good way to share the load. So, all right, well, there's just a little bit of stuff you can read about Access Marketing, but I want to open it up for questions. If there's anybody, okay, so we've got something in, yes, okay, I love it that somebody said, will I be sending slides? No, it's state secrets. I can't share this. Yes, of course. Happy to share that, which is great. You guys, I want to tell you, I think I've answered some of the most frequent questions I get when I do these kinds of talks. One of the most frequent questions I get is, I have such a strong and persnickety brand organization or brand leader. I don't think we will get support to do something like this, right? And I'll go back to the idea of helping that brand leader understand that you're trying to do this to support a sales effort. You're not actually trying to encroach on the brand, what the brand is trying to do. You're actually trying to amplify what the brand is trying to do. And more specifically, you are trying to do this so that you can support the sales organization to be able to have just a more variety of content that they can use to engage prospects. The other thing you can do with a really strong brand organization is you can say, let's work together to come up with the rules of the road. What can we say? What can't we say? Right? Because what you don't want to do, you guys, is you don't want to get in a situation where all of your content has to be approved by brand. That's the quickest way to get it sanitized and uninteresting, and it just goes into the pile of BS boring stuff that everybody's putting out. You really want to be able to say, no, I'm building a program that won't need brand approval, but we will follow brand rules, right? Because we want them to know that we're sensitive to brand rules, but that we don't want to have to be governed day to day from an approval standpoint by brand. Obviously, each of you will have your own unique rules that you have to apply in your own brand culture. So you'll just have to see. So that's one of the questions I get. The other question I get is time. They don't have time. And what I like to say with that is, it is our job as marketers and sales enablement practitioners to get, the biggest thing I have is, you have windshield time. I will call you while you were in the car. I will interview you. I will record it, and I will pull out a quarter's worth of good content if you will just give me a focused 30 minutes while you're already driving somewhere for 30 minutes. So what I try to help leaders do is I try to help them see, I'm not going to put this in your already full calendar. I'm going to fit this into the places where you already have time. So that's how I combat the time question, right? There's platform questions. I mean, we won't be able to get to all the questions today, but one of the things I hope you will do, you guys, is I hope that you will join us at Encompass, right? So those of you who are going to Encompass, you are going to be needing to, you are going to be really, really excited about all the great programming that Encompass has come up with this year. It is just incredible. So as all of you know, the annual Encompass event is November 2nd through 4th. 2nd through 4th in Tampa. If you haven't already registered, please go register. It'll be worth your time. I get to be part of a really awesome marketing workshop. Keith mentioned it in the beginning of this, on Monday afternoon at 1:30. This workshop will obviously going to be having individualized workshops as well as a panel discussion with myself, Laura Johns, Alyssa Miller. So you get to kind of hear a lot of different perspectives. My session very specifically is going to really lean into AI. So if you're super curious about AI, you won't want to miss that. I think you're going going to be able to get a lot of good nuggets from that. But all of our sessions, Alyssa's session, Laura's session, it's going to be great. You're not going to want to miss it. So please go and register for the show, get more information, see the agenda, make your plans to be there. And, I honestly just cannot wait to, see you all there. And I'm going to stop sharing just so we can kind of wrap up here. And hopefully this was helpful. I hope you guys all go connect with me on LinkedIn and, let's go figure out how to help you guys leverage your personalities within your organization to drive a revenue result at the end of the year. I think we'll all be better off for it. So Keith and Gail and the entire Encompass team, thank you guys so much for this opportunity to talk about this and to, just really kind of bring some new ideas to this audience, right? You've got a lot of sophisticated folks I saw on the registration list. So I'm grateful for this opportunity, and I really hope I get to shake everyone's hand when I see you guys all in Tampa for Encompass. So with that, I will sign off and wish you guys a great day, and hope I see you all in Tampa. So you guys take care.